going on, everybody? Thank you so much for coming back to another video. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. So it's been a while since I've reviewed a Mummy film. I reviewed the first two of the Brendan Fraser rebooted Mummy franchise, and then I just took a huge long pause in between those two and this one. So I guess you could say it's similar to the release schedule of the movies themselves. But yeah, guys, let's go ahead and talk about this movie. So leading up to this movie, I was incredibly excited as a kid. I remember back in the day, it was still around the time that MySpace was a thing, and every single time a new movie would be coming out, I would make my MySpace page completely themed around that movie, including the song. Anytime anybody would click on my MySpace page and there was a movie that I was excited for that was upcoming, my whole layout would be completely changed to that movie. And so this was one of those that I remember specifically being maybe one of the last ones that I did that for. And I remember just being so hyped about it. I love the first two Mummy films. If you guys have seen my reviews on those, the remakes with Brendan Fraser are just so much fun for me. Sometimes the stories are a little all over the place. Some of the special effects don't really hold up, but on an overall level, they're just big, over-the-top, fun, Indiana Jones-esque adventures with mummies that I really enjoy. I think that it has nice little nods and references to this classic old Universal horror monster films, while also being its own thing and kind of making it more of a fun action adventure kind of thing. And so that's something that really excited me growing up, leading up to this. The biggest disappointment I had even before I even watched this movie as a kid was the fact that they recast Rachael Wise character, Brendan Fraser's wife in these films, to Maria Bellows. And you know, she's a good actress. I enjoy her in a lot of things. And in this film, what I can't say is that she does her best job of just being that character, right? You just have to buy into it. It's more of something that the audience has to struggle with rather than her being a bad performer, because she does a great job. I think that she does a great job of continuing that character on. I just think that Rachael Wise just brings something very specific as an actress, and I just feel like that was kind of missing here, specifically between the chemistry between Brendan Fraser and her. It just wasn't the same when it came to Brendan Fraser and Maria Bellows. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that because at the end of the day, you know, when it comes to recasting, sometimes that's just something that you personally as an audience member struggle with because it kind of removes that same character in your mind. So the Tomb of the Dragon Emperor is dramatically different than the first two. The first two really had to do with, you know, your more traditional mummy, you know, an Egyptian mummy that comes to life and all of that jazz. Whereas in this one, it has to do with this really strong emperor from China back in the day who was essentially encased in stone via magic. And of course, there's the whole thing like, oh, if you bring him back, he'll come back way stronger, just like in the first two movies. I've got to commend them for going a completely different direction with this film. It does not have that traditional Egyptian mummy feel that you would expect from a mummy movie. They went with a different kind of mummy, and the overall visuals, because of that, definitely changed. There's something about the way the film looks and the feel and the vibe of the film that's definitely different. And of course, the settings are also different because a lot of the film takes place in Asia, which I really enjoy because they're able to bring out a lot of folklore and legends out of the Asian cultures and put them into this film, just like the Yetis that you see in the thumbnail. Easily one of my favorite sequences in the film. They're a little CG heavy when you go back and watch them, which I don't mind CG. You guys probably already know that. But yeah, they definitely aren't as crisp looking as CG as I remember them looking, but I love that sequence. The Yeti sequence is super awesome.
Abominable snowman!
The Tibetans call them Yeti!
But yeah, in this film, the basic premise is that you have Brendan Fraser's character and Maria Bellows' characters who are essentially retired from doing this, and now they get swooped up into this other adventure where now they have to fight this dragon emperor played by Jet Li. He is the mummy in this film. And what I can say about this film is this film has a lot of really cool action. I like a lot of the choreography. Of course, you have Jet Li, so there's definitely a lot of hand-to-hand combat in this film, and I really enjoy that about this film. I do enjoy a lot of the special effects. Similar to the last movies, you know, it's very CG heavy. You're either going to be into that or you're not going to be into it. Some of the action can seem very samey at times. However, I did have a really good time with this movie going back to revisit it. I think it's easily my least favorite of the three Mummy films, and it's a film that I genuinely enjoy. I love seeing Brendan Fraser in anything because we don't really get that anymore. So going back to rewatch anything with Brendan Fraser always puts a smile on my face. But yeah, on an overall level, I think this film is entertaining. I'm not necessarily bored watching it. However, I think my biggest gripes with it is the story just isn't nearly as compelling for me. I don't really feel like the emotional attachment to all the characters nearly as much as I do in the first two films. There are moments in those first two films, no matter how wacky and over the top they are, that you are really into these characters, you're really invested in what's going on, and I think that this film just didn't give as much of a compelling story that you really are as attached to what's going on. There's also not a real great sense of explanation about everything that has to do with the mummy, whereas in the last one I feel like, okay, here's the basic plot points of, you know, what he can do and how he can do them, and this one it just kind of felt like Jet Li's mummy was just kind of like this crazy badass monster that they just have to deal with, that kept on with the ability to do more and more and more. So, you know, that's either going to work for you or not work for you. On an overall level, I do recommend this film. I think it's good. I think if you enjoyed the first two films that you can have a good time with this. Like I said, easily the weakest of these films. This is the film that I took a while to get to because I don't really have too much to say about it other than what I already said in the last reviews for the last two. You know, a lot of fun action, feels like an Indiana Jones-esque adventure. Not as much as the first two, but you know, it definitely keeps that nature from the first two films. And yeah, it's just a film that's a nice, fun watch. It is disappointing that they recast Rachael Wise, which I feel, you know, not necessarily Maria Bello's fault, but it does hinder that relationship that they built up in the first two movies with, you know, Rachael Wise and Brendan Fraser. So it's just not there in the same level when it comes to Maria Bello's and Brendan Fraser. But yeah, it doesn't ruin the film, but you know, it still doesn't have that same dynamic that you like from the first two films. And then my biggest gripe I have with this movie is Brendan Fraser. Like I mentioned, I love seeing him in movies, and I do love him in this film in a lot of ways. But my issue with this film is it kind of felt like not only him, but specifically him because he's the focal point, is that the director just asked a lot of these actors to be on 11 at all times. What I love about Brendan Fraser's characters in the last two movies is that he's a pretty calm, collected character, and you know, when he does get loud and kind of over the top, it's usually very funny because it's kind of built up to that, or it's just kind of like a funny over the top situation, or they're in deep shit. Whereas in this movie, it just feels like every joke or every single situation he was raising his voice and just being over the top at 11 Brendan Fraser. I just feel like it doesn't always work. Sometimes it just feels like he's overdoing it. Sometimes it just feels like the humor is a little heavy-handed, and so that's some of my negatives when it comes to this film. But on an overall level, I enjoy it. I think it's the weakest of the three, and I think it's a film that I do highly recommend still, but I can understand if some people watch it and don't love it nearly as much as the first two. It's just it's just a good time. It's just a good fantasy action watch that I do recommend if you guys are into these kinds of movies. But yeah, guys, that's gonna be my thoughts on this movie. What do you guys think about it? Leave those comments down below. Do you like this movie? Do you not like this movie? One thing I forgot to mention is I enjoy the cinematography in this film. I do enjoy the set design, very similar to the last two films. You know, they're well-made movies. Some of the CG is some of the stuff that I think some people can really pick on. But for the most part, visually, the film is well done. Performance-wise, the movie is well done. And a lot of the action is really well done. I just think the narrative is not nearly as compelling, and it's not nearly as exciting. And some of the performances feel like they're on 11 when they should be a little bit more tame throughout. But on an overall level, I do recommend the movie. It's nothing crazy, but it's a good time, and I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say about it. Hit that like button down below, hit that subscribe button, comment your thoughts down below, and I'll see each and every single one of you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.